Before they take me through those doors, before the lights become too bright, and the room fills with voices, speaking in calm, practiced sentences. I need you to hear something from me, while I am still fully here, fully capable of choosing every word. I do not know what the doctors will say when I open my eyes again. I do not know whether fear is making this moment larger than it is, or whether I have spent my whole life making important moments smaller, because that was easier than admitting they could destroy me. But I know this. If I go into that room without telling you why I love you, then, whatever happens afterward, I will have committed the one failure I cannot explain away with logic. You may think you already know. You may think it is because of your kindness, your patience, the way your face changes when you are trying not to laugh, or the quiet dignity with which you have survived things you rarely speak about. Those things matter. They matter more than I have said, but they are not the whole reason, and that is what frightens me. Because the whole reason asks something of me that I have spent years avoiding. I have built my life around difficult problems. Problems are comforting when they can be measured. A machine fails, you find the weakness. A system breaks, you trace the cause. A risk appears, you calculate whether the possible future is worth the cost. Love does not cooperate with any of that. Love can give you all the data, and still leave you standing in the dark. It can make the strongest decision feel reckless, and the safest decision feel like betrayal. That is where you found me. Not when I was certain. When I was divided, there is something I need to ask you, and I need you to answer it only inside your own heart. If you knew that loving someone could end with you sitting alone in a quiet room, holding words they never came back to hear, would you still tell them? Would you still risk becoming the person who remembers everything? I used to think courage meant saying yes to danger. I was wrong. Sometimes courage is allowing one person to become irreplaceable. You became irreplaceable before I admitted you were important. That is the first truth. And I resented it. I resented how often I thought of you when I was supposed to be thinking about something else. I resented that your silence could affect me more than praise from a room full of people. I resented the strange vulnerability of waiting for your message and pretending I had not been waiting. Most of all, I resented that you made me imagine a future I could not control. You did not demand that future. You did not stand in front of me asking for promises. In some ways that made it worse. If you had pressured me, I could have called it pressure. If you had tried to possess me, I could have escaped and called the escape wisdom. But you simply stood there as yourself, and somehow that was more dangerous than any demand, because I wanted to stay. Do you understand how frightening that can be for a man who has trained himself to keep moving? To stay is not merely to remain in one place. To stay is to be seen repeatedly. It is to let someone notice the contradictions you can hide from everyone else. It is to be impressive on Monday and exhausted on Tuesday. It is to be certain in public and afraid at 3 in the morning. It is to discover whether someone loves the person beneath the momentum. I did not know if you would, and I did not know if I could survive finding out. If you have been listening this long, subscribe and stay close, because there are truths I can only say once I know you are still here. And tell me where you are watching from, because tonight I need to imagine the distance between us becoming smaller, not larger, not fantasy. Life, a cup left beside a book, a conversation interrupted by sleep, a disagreement that does not become abandonment, two people growing older without treating age as a tragedy, a hand reaching across the bed after an argument, not because everything is solved, but because love is still there while the problem is being solved. I began to want those things with you. Then I began to question whether wanting them was enough. You deserve more than a man who arrives with half his heart hidden behind work, responsibility, old wounds, and the habit of leaving emotional doors unlocked only long enough to escape through them. You deserve someone who does not make you decode silence. Someone who does not confuse intensity with intimacy. Someone who knows that a woman who has lived, lost, endured, and learned does not need grand promises as much as she needs consistency. Could I give you that? I told myself the mature thing might be to let you go. That sentence sounds noble until you examine it closely. Sometimes, letting someone go is just fear wearing good manners. Sometimes we call our retreat a sacrifice because we cannot bear to call it cowardice. I know that now. I did not know it then. So I created distance. Maybe you felt it. Maybe you wondered what you had done. Maybe you replayed conversations, searching for the exact sentence that changed me. There was no sentence. You had done nothing wrong. The problem was that I had begun to understand how much losing you would cost, and my mind offered me a cruel solution. Lose her deliberately before life can take her unexpectedly. Have you ever done that? Have you ever stepped away from something beautiful because beauty gave fate too much leverage over you? I nearly did it to us. There was another woman I could have chosen. I need to say that plainly because anything softer would be dishonest. She was easier for the life I had constructed, easier on paper, easier in timing, easier because I did not feel the same terrifying depth. I could have been kind to her. I could have built something respectable. From the outside, perhaps no one would have questioned it. For a while, I thought that might be the wiser choice. Do you hate me for admitting that? Maybe you should. But listen carefully. The danger was never that I loved her more. The danger was that I might choose a life requiring less courage and call it peace. I came close. That is one of the things I have carried into this hospital. Not guilt for loving someone else, because I did not love her the way I love you. Guilt for nearly allowing fear to make a permanent decision on my behalf. Guilt for imagining that a quieter heart was necessarily a safer heart. Guilt for thinking I could substitute compatibility for recognition. Because you recognize me, not the version people project onto me, not the man they praise, criticize, imitate, misunderstand, or reduce to a headline. You recognize the moments when I am performing certainty because uncertainty feels too exposed. You hear the pause before the answer. You notice when I become overly logical because emotion has moved too close, and still, you do not invade. That is rare, you wait. But I have wondered how long a person should be asked to wait for someone who keeps translating love into delay. That question has followed me into every quiet hour. What if your patience ends one day before my courage begins? What if I wake from this surgery ready to tell you everything, and discover that, while I was calculating the perfect moment, you finally chose yourself? I would understand. That is the unbearable thing. I would understand. I could not accuse you of abandoning me after I spent so long standing at the edge of commitment, asking you to believe in a future I was too frightened to name. Love does not become fair simply because the frightened person finally becomes brave. And there is something else. The surgery is not the only reason I am speaking now. I could do it for a day, a week, sometimes longer. Then something small would happen. I would hear a phrase you would have challenged. I would see an older couple walking slowly, not speaking, yet somehow completely together. I would imagine you years from now, laughing with someone who had not been afraid to choose you, and a feeling would move through me that I could not intellectualize. Not jealousy exactly. Grief. Grief for a life that had not even been lost yet. That is when I began to understand that there are two kinds of regret. There is regret for what you did, which at least gives you a memory. And there is regret for what fear prevented you from doing, which gives you nothing but an empty space where a life might have been. I have lived with many risks. This one was different because no one else could take it for me. I had to choose whether to become known, and I hesitated. You saw some of that hesitation, but not all of it. You saw the delayed replies, the changes in tone, the moments when warmth suddenly became distance. You did not see what happened after. You did not see me reading my own words and realizing how cold they sounded. You did not see me almost call, then put the phone down, because I did not know how to explain why I was pulling away from the person I most wanted near me. I thought control would protect us from chaos. Instead, control became the chaos. There was a night when I nearly decided to end whatever this was before it could become more. I had the words prepared, respectful words, mature words, words designed to leave no villain behind. I told myself you would recover faster if I made the cut clean. Then I imagined your face while reading them, not crying. That would have been easier for me to imagine. I saw you becoming quiet. I saw you accepting my decision with dignity. I saw you refusing to beg a man to recognize your value. And then I saw the days after, when you would slowly remove me from the places inside you where you had made room. That image broke something in me, because I realized I had been relying on your love while pretending I was undecided about mine. That was unfair. I was taking comfort from your presence while protecting myself from the responsibility of choosing you openly. So, why did I still not tell you? Because there was a deeper fear, not that you would reject me, that you would say yes. Rejection is painful, but it is clean. A yes creates a future. A yes means you can lose what you have been given. A yes means birthdays, illnesses, misunderstandings, forgiveness, aging, dependence, and the terrifying accumulation of shared history. A yes means one day one of you may have to stand beside a hospital bed and discover that love does not grant immunity from time. Look where I am now. Maybe that is why my hands are shaking. I can face the procedure. I can listen to probabilities. I can sign forms. What I cannot do calmly is, imagine you receiving a call you should never have had to receive without first knowing what you were to me. You were not a distraction. You were not a temporary softness in a difficult life. You were not someone I kept near because I feared being alone. You became the person against whom every possible future began to feel either true or false. And yet even that is not the real reason. I haven't told you the real reason yet. I can feel you asking what could possibly remain after all of this. I can feel the impatience, maybe even anger. You may be thinking that love should not be a maze, that if a man knows, he should speak, that a woman should not have to survive his internal war just to receive a simple truth. You are right. But the truth I have withheld changes the meaning of my hesitation. It changes the meaning of the other woman. It changes why I almost walked away. And it changes why, when the doctor explained what could happen today, the first thought in my mind was not about death. It was about a promise I made without telling you. There is a point where fear stops being private. It begins to injure the person standing nearest to it. I crossed that point with you. Every time I withheld reassurance because I was afraid. Reassurance would become a promise. I made you carry uncertainty that belonged to me. Every time I acted as though I needed more evidence, I ignored the evidence of my own behavior. I looked for you in rooms you were not in. I measured good days by whether I could tell you about them. I imagined your absence and called the pain confusion. What more did I think I needed? Perhaps permission from a version of myself that no longer existed. The man I was before you could survive by compartmentalizing everything. Work here, fear there, affection in a carefully controlled place. Loss sealed behind a door. Then you arrived, and the walls stopped holding. You made everything touch. That sounds beautiful. It was not always beautiful. Sometimes it was terrifying. When everything touches, an argument can affect sleep. A silence can affect concentration. A tender moment can awaken grief from years ago. Love does not simply add joy to a life. It reorganizes the architecture. I did not know whether I wanted to be reorganized. Then, in the later hours of last night, I understood something that left me more afraid than the surgery itself. I had already been changed. The decision I kept postponing had, in one sense, already happened. My heart had chosen before my courage signed the document, but there is still something you do not know, and I need to tell it correctly because, once I say it, I cannot return us to the safer ambiguity we have lived inside. If I wake up, I will have to live according to it. If I do not, these words will be the last place I was completely honest with you. The nurse will come soon. There are footsteps outside the door every few minutes, and each time they pass, I feel relief and disappointment at once. Relief because I have another minute. Disappointment because another minute gives me another chance to delay. That is the pattern I am trying to break. So hear me, there was a specific moment when I knew I loved you. Not suspected. Knew. I have never told you about it. It was not when you looked beautiful, though you did. It was not when you said something romantic. It was not when I missed you after an absence. It was the moment I realized I had the power to hurt you, and instead of feeling powerful, I felt terrified of becoming the reason you doubted your own worth. That changed me, because desire asks, can I have you? Love asks, who will I become if you trust me? And I did not like every answer I found. I saw the ways I could fail you. The silences, the disappearing into work, the instinct to solve when you needed me to listen, the arrogance of assuming that, because my feelings were deep, my behavior would automatically be enough. Deep feelings are not enough. A person can love you and still wound you through avoidance. A person can mean well and still waste years. A person can be afraid of losing you and behave in the exact way that makes losing you more likely. I was becoming that person. And then something happened that I have not been able to forgive myself for. You asked me a simple question. You asked whether there was a future for us. I did not answer you. Not truly. I gave you uncertainty because uncertainty protected me. I watched you absorb it. I watched you become smaller for a moment, not because you were weak, but because hope had nowhere to stand. I have replayed that moment more times than you know. If I could return to it, I would not give you a speech. I would take your hand and tell you that my hesitation was never evidence that you were difficult to love. It was evidence that I understood loving you would require me to stop living, as though every exit had to remain available. I was afraid to close the exits, tonight or this morning, whatever time it is in the world outside this room. I am more afraid of what happens if I leave them open, because an open exit is still an invitation to leave. And I do not want to leave you. But I have not yet told you what I promised. That is the truth waiting on the other side of those doors. If they call my name before I finish, you may never know why I made it, who I made it to, or why it means that the life I was preparing to choose may not be the life you thought I wanted. I can hear them coming now. And the worst thing is, I still do not know whether telling you will save us or finally break us. They are near. I can hear the wheels of a cart in the corridor, the low voices, the ordinary sounds of people doing work they have done 1,000 times. It is strange how ordinary the world remains when your own life feels suspended over an edge. Somewhere someone is pouring coffee. Somewhere, a woman is waking beside the person who chose her without making her wait for certainty. And here I am, finally understanding that the promise I kept from you was never meant to protect you. It was meant to protect me from the moment when I would have to become accountable to what I already knew. I promised myself that if I ever became certain you could be happier without me, I would disappear. That was the promise. It sounds almost loving, does it not? That is what made it so dangerous. I dressed fear as sacrifice. I told myself that if my life was too complicated, if my attention was too divided, if the pressure around me became too heavy, then the noble thing would be to remove myself before you had to ask. I would make the decision for you. I would absorb the pain. I would tell myself that somewhere, eventually, you would meet a quieter man with a simpler life and thank me for leaving. But there was arrogance inside that promise. I never asked what you wanted. I decided that loving you gave me the right to determine what kind of difficulty you were allowed to choose. I imagined your future without me and called my imagination wisdom. I treated you as though you were too fragile to look at the whole truth and make your own decision. You are not fragile. You have lived enough to know that every real relationship has a cost. You know that peace is not the absence of difficulty. You know that two people can be devoted to each other and still disappoint each other, misunderstand each other, become tired, become frightened, need forgiveness. You were never asking me to guarantee a painless future. You were asking whether I would be there inside the imperfect one, and I could not answer. Can you understand why that memory hurts more today? I am about to surrender control of my own body to people I must trust, and suddenly I see how often I asked you to trust me while refusing to surrender any control at all. I wanted your openness without offering equal exposure. I wanted the warmth of being loved without standing fully in the risk of loving back. No, that is not completely true. I loved you back. I simply kept trying to negotiate the consequences. There are no negotiations left in this room. I need you to know, however, that there was a moment after they scheduled this surgery when I nearly broke the promise in the worst possible way. I nearly contacted the other woman. Not because I suddenly loved her. Not because I wanted to begin a life with her. I thought about reaching for the easier connection because I was afraid of leaving unfinished pain with you. That sounds cruel because it was. For several minutes, fear convinced me that if I turned away from you before entering this hospital, then whatever happened would hurt you less. I imagined creating distance so quickly that you would become angry enough to detach. I thought anger might protect you from grief. Do you see what fear can do to a person who believes he is being rational? I almost chose the wrong woman, not because she was right for me, but because she represented an exit that required less honesty. Then I saw your name on my phone. You had not sent some grand declaration. You had not begged for reassurance. It was something ordinary, almost painfully ordinary, and that was what stopped me. Because suddenly I understood that love is not proved only in the moments when music should be playing in the background. It is proved by whose ordinary words can pull you back from an extraordinary mistake. I did not contact her, but I came close enough that I cannot pretend the thought was harmless. Does that change how you see me? Maybe. I have to allow that. There is another truth beneath the promise, though. The deeper one. The one I have circled because saying it makes the possibility of losing you almost unbearable. I did not fall in love with you because you made me feel young. I know how easily people speak about love that way, especially when time has placed history on a face and experience in a voice. They say someone makes them feel young again, as though youth were the highest form of aliveness. You did something more profound. You made me want to grow old honestly. With you, that is the real reason, not because I fear age, not because I want someone to rescue me from loneliness, not because I need an audience for the life I have built. I love you because when I imagine the years taking things from me, speed, certainty, strength, relevance, I can still imagine sitting beside you without feeling diminished. Do you know how rare that is? Most of my life has been organized around becoming more capable, more useful, more ambitious, more difficult to ignore. But love eventually asks a different question. Who will you trust when life begins asking you to become less of what the world applauded? I trust you with that man, the slower man, the tired man, the man who may one day repeat a story you have already heard, the man who may need help with something he once did effortlessly, the man who cannot hide behind velocity because time has finally become faster than he is. I can imagine you seeing him and still seeing me. That is why I love you. But please do not mistake this for a peaceful revelation. The moment I understood it, I became more afraid, not less. Because losing a fantasy hurts. Losing a future you can actually see is different. I can see you there. And this morning, for the first time, I had to imagine that I might never reach that future. My composure failed. I went into the bathroom because I did not want anyone to see. I closed the door, put both hands against the sink, and tried to breathe, as though breathing were another technical problem. It did not work. I thought of your hands. I thought of the question I had refused to answer. I thought of you learning that I had gone into surgery, carrying all these words and still had not given them to you. I wept. There is no elegant way to say that. Not because I suddenly believed I was going to die. Because I realized I had been living as if love could wait until I became fearless. It cannot. Fearlessness is not coming. If I choose you, I will sometimes be afraid. If you choose me, you will sometimes be afraid too. There will be days when one of us wonders whether we are enough for the other. There will be moments when old defenses return. There may be arguments that expose wounds neither of us created. The question is not whether fear will appear. The question is whether fear gets a vote. I gave it too many votes. I let it sit at the head of the table. I let it speak in your voice and tell me you would eventually leave. I let it speak in my voice and tell me I would eventually fail you. I let it predict disasters and then call those predictions intelligence. But fear knows nothing about the future. It only knows how to repeat the past. And you are not my past. You are the woman in front of me. The woman I almost lost while trying to protect myself from losing her. And still, even as I say that, I can feel another reversal inside me. What if I am doing this because I am scared? What if the hospital has distorted everything? What if I walk out of here and the intensity fades? That thought came to me an hour ago, and for a moment I almost deleted every word I had prepared. I nearly chose silence again. I told myself that perhaps the responsible thing was to wait until after the surgery, until fear was gone, until I could test whether the feeling remained. Then I realized the absurdity. The feeling has remained through distance, doubt, avoidance, temptation, pride, and every argument I have made against it. What exactly am I still testing? There comes a point when caution becomes refusal. I reached that point long ago. So if I sound uncertain, understand the distinction. I am not uncertain about loving you. I am uncertain about whether I deserve the future I am asking you to consider. I am uncertain about how much damage my hesitation has already done. I am uncertain whether you will still be there when these doors open again. Those uncertainties belong to reality, but love belongs there too. I hear someone speaking to the nurse outside. My time is becoming smaller. There is one more thing I must tell you before they come in. The promise I made to leave, if I thought you would be happier without me, was based on a lie I had told myself for years. I believed love meant protecting the other person from every burden you carry. It does not. Sometimes love means trusting them enough to show them the burden and allowing them to decide what they can hold. I should have trusted you. I should have told you I was afraid. I should have said that the thought of needing you frightened me because need creates vulnerability. I should have admitted that I was comparing you to losses you had nothing to do with. I should have told you that every time I became distant after a beautiful moment, it was often because the beauty itself had frightened me. Instead, I made you guess. I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry that asks you to erase consequences. The kind that accepts them. If your answer is no, I will have to live with that. If I wake up and you tell me the door is closed, I will not call you cruel. I will not remind you of this hospital room as though fear created a debt you owe me. I will know that I had opportunities before today. That possibility is tearing through me now. Because for most of this confession, I have been afraid of not waking up. Suddenly I am afraid of waking up too late. What if you have already made the decision I kept postponing? What if someone else has shown you the steadiness I only imagined giving you? What if the wrong woman was never the greatest danger? What if the greatest danger was that, while I was considering the wrong life, you learned to build the right one without me? I cannot compete with peace. I would not ask you to abandon it. If another man has looked at you without hesitation and made you feel chosen in the simple, consistent ways I failed to provide, then my confession does not erase him. Love is not ownership. My realization does not create a claim on your future. That is where this becomes almost unbearable. I can finally be completely certain and still lose you. Perhaps that is the price of waiting. The nurse just opened the door. She said they will be ready soon. I told her I needed another minute. 1 minute. How many years of human life are changed by 1 minute? A proposal, a goodbye, a phone call answered or missed. A sentence spoken before pride can stop it. This is mine, so I am going to stop protecting myself. I love you because you do not make me feel invincible. You make me feel mortal, and somehow you make mortality worth accepting. With you, time matters. That is terrifying. It is also the clearest thing I have ever known. I love the woman you are now, not an earlier version of you, not an imagined version polished by fantasy. I love the history in you. I love that you have survived enough to know tenderness is not weakness. I love that your heart has not remained untouched, and yet is still capable of opening. I do not need you to become younger. I need enough years to know you more deeply. I want to learn the stories you tell slowly. I want to know which memories still hurt when the room becomes quiet. I want to understand what makes you withdraw, what makes you feel safe, what you stopped asking for because someone once taught you it was too much. And I want you to know me beyond the machinery of achievement. That is the hidden future I was afraid to name. Not a dramatic life, a shared one. I imagined us at a table years from now. I imagined you looking at me with that expression that says you know exactly when I am pretending not to be tired. I imagined us disagreeing about something trivial and then laughing because neither of us could remember how the disagreement began. I imagined loss coming, because loss always comes, and I imagined not facing it alone. Then I made the mistake of thinking that, because I could imagine losing you, I should avoid having you. That is like refusing to live because life ends. I will not do that anymore. If I wake up, I will not ask you for an answer immediately. I will not turn survival into pressure. I will come to you when I am able, and I will tell you this again, without machines nearby, without fear sharpening every sentence. Then you can choose, freely. That word matters more to me now than certainty. Choose me because the life we could build feels true to you, not because you are frightened by what almost happened today. Choose me only if you can love the real man who walks out of this room, not the vulnerable voice speaking from the edge of uncertainty, and if you choose me, I will choose you in ways that can be seen. Not perfectly, but visibly. I will not make you live on implication. I will not ask you to translate distance into devotion. I will not keep one foot outside the door and call that independence. There will still be work. There will still be pressure. There will still be moments when I fail to say the right thing. But you will know which side of the decision I am standing on. Yours. The door is opening again. This time I cannot ask them to wait. I thought I would feel panic at this moment. Instead, I feel something quieter. Not peace exactly. Clarity. I finally understand why I needed to tell you before the surgery. It was never because I believed these might be my last words. It was because I could no longer allow fear to be the author of the words I left unsaid. If I come back, I want to come back as a man who has already crossed the line he was afraid to cross. If I do not, then at least you will never have to wonder. You were loved, not casually, not conveniently, not as an idea. You were loved in the frightening, adult sense of the word. The sense that sees consequences and chooses truth anyway. And if there is still a place for me when I wake up, I will spend whatever time we are given proving that this confession was not created by a hospital room. It was revealed by one. They are calling me. I must go. For the first time, I am not asking the future for permission to love you. I am simply telling the truth. I choose you. And if I am fortunate enough to open my eyes again, I hope the first life I begin building is the one I was almost too afraid to admit I wanted.